Sure. I mean, I couldn't agree more, Matt, that I think it's easy to think about this whole a lot of these challenges we're talking about today that somehow when you have the big announcement where the jobs come, um, and somehow like all this is solved, right? Like that's a big piece of it, right? You have to have the physical jobs. You have to have companies that are willing to invest, but the work's not done. I mean, there's a lot of work to lead up to an announcement like that, and then even when jobs come, the work of getting people into those jobs and getting them to stay in those jobs and getting them to grow careers in industries is a lot of just really challenging work. And I know we'll talk about examples from what we've seen. It's hard for me not to get into a little bit of kind of the perspective that the experience I have kind of in this conversation, but in a former role, we were really focused on prime age employment gap individuals. So individuals that are 25 to 54 years of age that were neither working nor looking for work. So folks that had fallen completely outside of the workforce. And in Eastern Kentucky, we have one of the highest prime age employment gaps, which is really the difference between the national prime age employment rate and a localized or regional prime age employment rate. And that delta in our case was like 30%. You know, nationally, that number's around 80%, and it was closer to 50% for where we operated. And so that delta, 30% meant like 40,000 people of the counties that we were focused on, which was like 20% of the total population. So just a huge number of folks that if they were located someplace else across the country or had been born, or you know, if they swapped, right, that statistics would show they probably would be working in some capacity. And Matt, to your point, the reasons for that were very varied, and they all were kind of mixed together, right? They're what you could isolate, like you could say it was partly this, partly this, partly this, but you couldn't just go fix one thing at a time. So, I mean, one issue was there was just a lack of overall jobs. I mean, the data showed that the 40,000 people that needed jobs was not going to be was going to drastically outweigh the 5 to 10,000 total jobs that were available year over year. So you had, you know, a lack of supply to meet the overall demand. But then, Matt, to your point, you had all of these other factors from childcare, transportation, housing. I mean, in rural context, right, you have a county seat where typically a lot of the industry is located, but you have big counties where population density is spread throughout the county, right? So it may take somebody 30 minutes to drive into work. You know, there are no bus systems. You can't buy a car from everybody. So what do you do, right? Then you have some of the even more complicated kind of mental behavioral things of, you know, our place, for example, that has been wrecked by the opioid epidemic, right? So people that are in recovery or people that, you know, really have just been in generational poverty for their whole lives. So they're, you know, they may come to you as present themselves as a 35-year-old individual that has a lot of promise, that wants to go to work, but mentally they may be just severely immature because of just constantly being in survival mode. So you're almost having to start back from scratch with this person in front of you, like getting them stabilized, making sure they have a place to live, you know, they can pay their utility bills, they have something to eat, something that gets them focused on, okay, now that like survival is not in play, like what's the next step for you? And it might probably was going to be a minimum wage job, right? Because so they could build up some skills and experience. But obviously that wasn't the ultimate end goal for that person, but it was taking those steps. And so I think the point I'm making is when you say an all hands on deck approach, it's a lot of partners bringing something to the table. It's also having some sort of backbone organization that is literally looking at this at like a micro level of each individual person that needs a job, how all those pieces are working together, funding to be able to bridge people, and then just a patience, right? Like you're not this stuff is not going to get fixed for some of our individuals that are deepest entrenched in, you know, poverty, or that have the most barriers to getting back into the workplace. Like, but we can't give up on them just because they're going to be the longest term projects, and that might be a poor way to word it. You know, our workforce system shouldn't really just be designed for maybe those that are structurally unemployed, to be able to provide them incentives to bounce right back up, and then not be able to serve these people that are a little bit further behind, that represents the vast majority of individuals that are outside of the workforce. So hopefully that answers some of it, Matt. I could go on and on, but I guess to sum it all up, it's just very complicated, and it's going to take a ton of time and resources, but the opportunity cost of doing nothing or remaining at the status quo is way more expensive.